This episode is sponsored by yet another incredible company that I stand behind fully, and that is Bubs Naturals. Now, I've not only used Bubs products for 4 years now, but I've also had the founder, Sean Lake, on the show twice. And they are offering you, the audience of the Behind the Shield podcast, 20% off your entire order, and I will give you that code in a moment. Now, Bubs has a very powerful backstory. Glenn Bub Doherty is one of the 2 Navy SEALs killed protecting the CIA facility in Benghazi. And wanting to honor his best friend, Sean stood up this company. Now, it began with their flagship product, which is their collagen. And I have to say, as a Brit with really dry skin who's now 51, I cannot underline the importance of collagen in your diet. I have seen a huge positive impact on my skin, nails, hair, and most importantly, digestive system. Another thing that I use religiously is their MCT creamers. That's the part of coconut oil that is good for our brain. And they come in dairy and non-dairy, depending on your diet. Now, I started taking Bub's latest product, creatine, about 3 months ago. And that was primarily because it's been proven to improve cognition and brain health. But not only did I witness that, I also saw an improvement in my performance, my lean muscle mass, and even a reduction in inflammation and sports injury pain. Now, in addition, Bubs makes apple cider vinegar gummies, vitamin C, and their hydration product, Hydrate or Die. And several of these products are also NSF certified, which is the highest level of certification as far as efficacy and cleanliness. Now, one of the most important elements of this company, in my opinion, is that they are a social business, meaning 10% of their profits go to charity, and in this case, that is the Glenn Doherty Foundation. Now, as I mentioned before, they are offering you, the audience of the Behind the Shield podcast, 20% off your entire order if you use the code BTS at bubsnaturals.com. And if you want to hear more about the products, the backstory, and how Sean used Glenn's story to help other veterans, listen to episodes 558 and 1055 of the Behind the Shield podcast. Welcome to the Behind the Shield podcast. As always, my name's James Gearing, and this week it is my absolute honor to welcome on the show filmmaker and the creator of Burning Down the House, Tommy Dwyer. Now, in this conversation, we discuss a host of topics, from his childhood in a firefighter family, the cold storage fire, exposing some of the horrendous conditions our firefighters experience in their stations, mental health, cancer, PFAS, and so much more. Now, before we get to this incredible conversation, as I say every week, please just take a moment. Go to whichever app you listen to this on, subscribe to the show, leave feedback, and leave a rating. Every single 5-star rating truly does elevate this podcast, therefore making it easier for others to find. And this is a free library of almost 1,300 episodes now. So all I ask in return is that you help share these incredible men and women's stories so I can get them to every single person on planet Earth who needs to hear them. So with that being said, I introduce to you Tommy Dwyer. Enjoy. Well, Tommy, I want to start by saying 2 things. Firstly, thank you to our mutual friend, Diane Cotter, for making this introduction. And secondly, I want to welcome you onto the Behind the Shield podcast today.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you very much. And Diane's the best. She's a true pit bull for the cause, man. So yeah, certainly appreciate her.
She definitely is. Definitely is. So very first question, where on planet Earth are we finding you today?
Right now, I'm right outside of Worcester, Massachusetts. So right in the heart of Central Mass, if you can't tell by my obnoxious accent and fast talking.
Well, I want to start at the very beginning of your story. I know that involves that area. So tell me where you were born and tell me a little bit about your family dynamic, what your parents did, how many siblings.
100%. So I'm an only child, believe it or not. I was born right in Worcester, Massachusetts, and my father and all my uncles and two of my cousins were firefighters. So predominantly Worcester firefighters, and then one uncle that was a Fitchburg firefighter. So come from a strong fire department background, blue collar, middle class, Irish American kid from Worcester.
So, firstly, as a child of a firefighter, especially when you were younger,
Yeah.
what were the pros and what were the cons of having a parent in the fire service?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that goes into that. I think I could do an entire documentary on families of firefighters, right? So the pros obviously were the schedule. So I got to spend a lot of time with my father, and I got to be with him. The cons were the danger of the job. I remember as a little kid, my parents joke around with me now because when my father would go to work, not jokingly, as a little kid up until I was about 8 or 9, I would say like, Dad, like have a good night or a good day. Like, please don't die today. And like, that's what I genuinely thought as a little kid. And then, lo and behold, stuff like that does happen. And the other downside is like really having a hard time understanding my father until I got older, understanding maybe why he would be stressed out about stuff, tired, not wanting to come home and immediately jump into like hanging out with me. I didn't really understand any of that stuff until I sort of experienced it firsthand through the journey that I went on the past year and a half. So there's a lot of ups and a lot of downs. It's not an easy thing being a child or a spouse of a firefighter, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I know these days Worcester works 42 hours a week and they have, I think it's 1 on 2 off, 1 on 4 off, if I got that right.
Yeah.
What was your dad working that even back then?
No, so they did the days and nights. So they would do 2 days, 1 day off, 2 nights, 3 days off. So it was a different schedule. They were doing the 12s and 14s instead of the whatever or however it was split up instead of the 24s. I think they maybe switched to 24s right at the very end of his tenure, but by then I was an adult. So for the most of my childhood life, it'd be like 2 days on, 1 day off, 2 nights on, 3 days off.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I know we'll get to the cold storage fire in a second, but what were some of the notable calls or notable events that your dad, would talk about?
Yeah, I mean, he didn't really talk about much at all. I had the fortunate experience of growing up right behind my grandmother. So my grandmother lived in the house behind us, and my uncles and father would go over every day for lunch with my gram, and they would sit around and talk. So I heard all of the stories in like a third hand or secondhand fashion where they would be talking to each other, and I would be sort of sitting as a little kid and observing wild conversations in language that no 4-year-old should probably be subject to. But they kind of always included me as like the fourth brother, right? So I was like really like a very much younger brother than the three of them. So I mean, most of the stuff they talked about was funny. They would obviously like, bust balls and like joke around about guys and stuff that happened on calls. For me, like other than obviously like the tragedies, one of the most memorable things for me was when my father and Uncle John were both working on the same truck. And they both were awarded Firefighter of the Year in Massachusetts for a rescue that they made, a very dramatic rescue over a ladder that was at an 80-degree angle out of a 6th-floor window. I think they pulled 7 or 8 people out and saved their lives. So for me, that's like the most memorable sort of like fire story that's not like funny that impacted me, other than obviously like the tragedies that we've been through here.
So what about the cold storage for? That was fire, excuse me. That was December 3rd, 1999. I'm assuming that was during your father's career?
Yes. I mean, very close to home. So my father was first alarm on that fire. So my father was on rescue one that night where 2 guys died on his truck. And then my Uncle John was also same group. He went second alarm to that fire. So it's hard for me to even talk about that night. I don't like to talk about it. I don't want any kind of like, I don't want to make it seem like it's something that is a big story for me, because there were so many people that were affected so much more than I was. But really tough night, and something that, I've never read the books. I've never read the stories. I experienced it and I don't want to go back to it. And that's just me personally. I know some other people deal with it differently, but my middle name is Jay. In the Screen Actors Guild, I had to pick a new name because it was already a Tom Dwyer. So I picked Jay for Jay Lyons, who was one of the 6 that died that night. He was my hero growing up, well before that fire. All the guys used to joke on my dad because when I'd go to the station, put the gear on, I would pretend I was Jay Lyons because he was like young and cool and like just like a funny kind of guy. So Jay was my hero well before he became everybody else's hero. And after he passed away, me and his father became pen pals for years. We'd write each other letters until his father passed on also. So, I did that as a subtle nod to my personal hero when I was a kid.
Well, you had this fear when you were young, don't die today, daddy. Then you
Yeah.
have, something devastating like that. How did that affect you and the way that you saw the safety of your father? And then what did you see as far as the ripple effect of that event on the men that you were interacting with all the time?
I mean, I wanted my dad to quit after that. I'm not going to lie. This was before, 99 for those that aren't as old as I am. This was before cell phones. This was before social media. This was a fire playing out live on TV that my mom and I had to sit and watch with no ability to contact anyone because all the firehouses' phones were jammed. And we knew that my uncle and my father were there. And watching it play out in the sort of slow horror that it played out in of like, one guy missing, two guys missing, maybe 3 dead, 2 guys dead, 4 missing, like just the news cycle at that time. I remember the fire came in at around 6 p.m. and we sat watching the TV from then until about, I think it was like 5 or 6 a.m. The sun was kind of coming up from what I remember. And I was just sitting on the couch, clutching a picture of my grandfather, just praying against all odds that like this was a missed report or something was wrong and these guys were going to come walking out. And I'll tell you, I don't really know how to explain it, but to hear finally the names of the men that did pass away that night and the horrific feeling that I had of being relieved and happy that it wasn't my dad, but then completely devastated because it's guys that we've known our whole lives and went to cookouts with. And I know a lot of their kids that were my exact age. The feeling of like really just incredible guilt of being like, oh, I'm glad it's not my dad, but it's my dad's best friends was something that like I still can't really justify or comprehend. I wanted my father to quit. I wanted my uncles to quit. They obviously didn't. They kind of like dug in and doubled down, but like it changed my dad and it changed a lot of my dad's friends in a way that they really shut down. Like he became very not telling me anything about the job, not really talking about anything. Like he still really doesn't talk about it. And like the core group of guys that were there on that first and second alarm, they don't really talk about it. Like if you watch a lot of the press and a lot of the news, it's not really the guys that were right there in the thick of it right away. They just don't talk about it. So it became almost like my dad always says to me, we had never lost until that time. So it was like being a football team that was undefeated and you were like having fun and like riding it and just like crushing other teams. And then you lost and you're like, we can actually lose. This is crazy, So yeah, it's a lot to process.
I remember talking to Brendan McDonough, who was the only survivor of the Prescott 19, the wildfire, devastating wildfire. And it was the same element, you had all these people getting these lists. And then when Brendan came in, and he was the sole survivor of that entire crew, the survivor's guilt that he felt, and almost like the resentment, even though it was just through grief, but some of these other family members where their person hadn't made it because he was the only single, hotshot that walked through the door of that hall. So I mean, it does, sound familiar from some of the other accounts I've had from people that have been through similar things.
Yeah, it's an overwhelming kind of feeling and emotion that never goes away. It doesn't matter if it's 30 years or 20 years ago. Every time someone brings it up, I'm kind of like, I don't like that,
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a normal reaction to that. I mean, you shouldn't like that. You know what I mean? It is a tragedy.
Yeah.
What, if any, were the takeaways from that? The kind of tailboard critique. Like, what were, if any, were there any mistakes made? Were there any lessons learned, or was it simply a tragedy that had the same thing happen again, we probably would have lost 7 people again?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a firefighter, right? So I can't really speak for, the reports and what came out afterwards. I think what I know a lot of safety stuff was put in place after, in terms of how they attack buildings. I know they sort of started diagramming like A side, B side, C side, because part of it was the some of the men didn't know where they were, right? They came in from the roof and they say, hey, we're 2 floors down from the roof, but we don't know how many floors up from the ground we are. There was no windows. There was no way of measuring that. So I know some of that stuff came in place after that of like, hey, we're going to take account of where everybody is at all times and they had like a safety chief that was installed and a driver with the safety chief that's in charge of mapping where everybody is. So I think there were, a lot of safety things put in place. What drives me nuts about stuff like this is like, why does it take that to have these in place in the first place, right? And that's a big thesis of my film, as you saw, is like, I know we think of firefighters when there's tragedies or a heroic situation. We need to think about them at all times. We need to think about safety and health of these firefighters at all times, not just when someone dies or when someone gets hurt or when someone gets rescued. So I think there was a lot of stuff that changed from that. But, I wish it changed a week before that.
I've met that resistance for this kind of conversation I've had with the work week, amongst many other things. And, Worcester is working the work week that the rest of the country needs to work toward. I think the 24/72 is the ideal pattern just because of the rest and recovery after every
100%.
shift. But they're pretty damn close, let's be honest.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing. And someone was talking to someone today, even from a, prevention implementation. Let's say you put in a strength and conditioning coach or a mental health counselor. When things don't happen, then people say, well, we've got nothing to count, rather than, let's be honest, putting your big girl pants on and going, well, even though we don't have anything to measure, that's a good thing that we're not having things happening. But there's almost a resistance to things that work because then you can't measure it, rather than just use common sense and go, well, of course it's safer this way. Of course our membership is healthier and happier. Because we can't count the people leaving anymore. We can't count the overtime because it's gone.
Yeah.
But that's a metric that you should encourage you to go that way, rather than, as we're going to talk about, wait for numerous line of duty deaths and then go, oh, maybe we should change.
Yeah, it's so interesting, James, right? And we should be leaders in this industry. We should be leaders on the forefront of the technology and the way we're implementing fire ground tactics. I spoke about this yesterday. I kind of went around to all the stations in Worcester and was talking about the film. And I was riding along with this girl, Jess, who owns a company called Worcester Wares, and she does all their work gear, right? And I said, what's weird, Jess? And like in the film, in the research and reading and studying that I did for the film, one thing that's not really well documented or categorized is what this job does to you after the job, right? So my father, who got on in the 1980s, the average guy in his class now would be 68 to 70 years old. If there were 20 guys in his class, I bet 6 of them are still alive. And I think you could go through every class, kind of right down the line and say, 1980, 4 guys alive, 1982, 6 guys alive. And that's not normal. These guys are not old guys. And there's not a good really source of what happens. There's numbers on line of duty stuff, but this is a lifetime. This is a long career. And it kind of hit me where I was like, most of my dad's friends are dead. And my dad's had 2 massive heart attacks and cancer already. So it's like, this isn't normal, but we kind of just take it for, and I'm sure you see it, kind of just take it for normal when these guys in their 50s and 60s are just dropping dead left and right. And we're just like, oh yeah, well, that there goes Mike, and Bill's gone now, and it's something that I've kind of become jaded to, and I didn't really wake up to it till yesterday when I was driving, and I was like, this is weird. Like that's not normal. Like you don't see that in like guys that work in an office job where they're like, oh yeah, we're 60 and all the guys on my sales team are all dead. It's just me left. It's like that's not normal.
When at the very end of the film, obviously you show all the cancer deaths and the ages, and it's interesting because it stops at 69. I would imagine that those are, the anomalies really. Some of the guys that are working in these departments that, have had an incredible career, and we all know those guys. But they're few and far between. But
Yeah.
then it really illustrates that that's the tip of the iceberg, and you just kind of touched on it. I've said this many times. Our statistics are bullshit
Yeah.
because they're not factoring in the retirees.
It's
Retirees or
crazy.
people that left or people that got fired or whatever it
Yeah.
is, people that aren't wearing a uniform. The moment the door closed on, behind me on my last day, if
Yep.
I dropped dead on the parking lot back then, I wouldn't be a statistic. So
Nope.
it's not about if you are wearing the uniform or not. It's, as you said, it's the lifespan. And there's
Yeah.
an unofficial statistic. I'm sure you've heard about it. We die within 5 years of retirement. And
Which
no
is
one's
like,
done a study, but everyone says the same thing.
and it's so not normal, right? So just to speak from my own personal family, my father had his first massive heart attack less than a week after he retired. He retired, and like 5 days later, he had a massive heart attack before he could even have a retirement, anything, right? Almost died, 99% blocked right coronary artery. My dad's cousin, who I called my uncle, Cliffy DeCourcy, died, I guess technically in the line of duty, but he had idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis and died 7 days after he retired. So they retired him and he died, and it was forced out because of the fibrosis that he got on the job. But they're both considered retirees, right? That's not like you walk off your job on Tuesday and you have a heart attack on Thursday, and you're not considered in the statistics is kind of crazy.
Well, especially when you think the carrot on the stick is the retirement, is the pension.
Yeah,
Now people all get into it for the love of the job. But if
for
you
sure.
reach a point physically, mentally, relationship wise, where if that carrot wasn't there, you'd be like, all right, 14 years was enough,
Yeah,
18, 21, whatever. And you just go when you decide it's time to go. We wouldn't have, everyone stopping at the same time. And so when these guys are chasing this carrot and the environment is not set up for them to thrive, and
yeah,
then the thing that they were waiting for 25, 30 years, they get to enjoy for, 1, 4, whatever it is.
yeah,
It shows you the lunacy of the lure at the end of the hook, if you like. But the
for sure.
reality is we're a group of people that want to serve and we adore this profession. And we're going to obviously circle around to the fact that they deserve an environment to perform at the highest level and longevity as well. But if we don't have a VA, as I always say, and we're not
Yeah,
counting the shortened lifespans, and bearing in mind the men and women that toe the line at the beginning of this profession are arguably fitter and stronger than the average civilian, their lifespan should be even longer. And I think if you average it out, we die 12 years younger than the average civilian. So I'd say,
yeah,
let's say 20, let's round it off is what it should
yeah.
be. That means that there's probably 100 times the numbers that we call line of duty deaths that are actual shortened lifespans of first responders.
Without a doubt. And like, without a doubt. And someone says it in my film. I think it's one of the guys from Westwood. He says, people take for granted that we're doing this job, but in Massachusetts, it's 32 or 33 years until you can retire. And being around this stuff for 32 years, all these cancer causing materials and all these stressful situations that, like, that's a long time. That's a long time. You don't take a soldier and say, like, hey, you're on the front lines of Vietnam for 32 years, right? It's like you do a year and you cycle out and they like reacclimate to the world. It's like, it's a long time.
Absolutely. Well, another acute event less than 2 years after the cold storage fire was 9/11. So
Yeah.
talk to me about that through your eyes. And then again, with this fire family you were part of, how did it impact them?
Yeah. I mean, it was a very similar thing that was just on a massive scale, right? And again, much like we talked about down the road, the event was one day. The impacts from the event we're still seeing today. We're still seeing impacts from the warehouse fire today. I have friends of my father's that are suffering severe medical issues from not the fire itself, but the 2 weeks after the fire, where they were manually digging through rubble, trying to find their lost brothers, breathing in chemicals and dust and cold storage materials and asbestos, that are still getting sick and dying to this day. Now, 9/11 is that times infinity, where these men and women suffered the catastrophic event that was 9/11. But the fallout from 9/11 is immeasurable. Like you can't even put a stamp on what that's done to the fire service, not just in New York, but kind of worldwide, because there were people flying in from all over the world to support the men and women of NYFD that were dealing with all the same stuff they did. It's immeasurable, James.
So what about that day through your eyes?
I mean, that day through my eyes was sort of like Pavlovian, right? Like when you start seeing stuff like that, it brought me right back to December 3rd, which is not a good place. It's not a happy place to be. And for me, it was almost like I'm the same with 9/11. And I don't know if you are or not. I don't watch anything about it. I never watched a story about it. I don't read books about it. And it's not because I don't love and care about it. It's because I feel like I care about it too much. And I feel like I'm too close to it, that I don't know if I'm mentally capable of bringing myself back to those moments. Like those moments for me are stuff that I put in a locker somewhere far away, and maybe someday I'm able to go back and visit. But like with 9/11, it happened. It was on the news. I would try and change the channel anytime I saw stuff about it. I don't, sadly, like I don't celebrate those days. I bury them as far as I can away, because I don't think I'm strong enough to face them, to be honest with you.
Well, I think that is strong enough, compartmentalizing sometimes. And, because you have this tragedy 2 years prior that now you're layering, whereas most of us were disconnected from both. So that it's not the same acute visceral response. But I mean, it's definitely something that probably needs to work through when the time is right.
Yeah, 100%.
What about, again, your dad, your other firefighter relatives? Again, this is ripping open a wound, not only locally, but now they're seeing 343 of their own perish in New York as well.
100%. I think they're the same as me, and I don't know if it's like the Irish sort of like that whole like that whole area of like where we're all you're obviously, I think you must be English, right? Like,
I am, yeah.
We're very much like we push down the emotion instead of letting it out, and they were the same. I think they kind of shut down to it. Like my dad's the same way. Like he'd be like, I don't want to see this. Like I don't need to see this. Like what else are we doing today? Like type of thing. Obviously, like he wanted to help in any way they could. And I know that like the Worcester local sent a bunch of stuff and guys and supported their team. My dad was a member of the critical incident stress team that I believe went out to a bunch of other departments, not just 9/11, but actually was, believe it or not, my dad was one of the guys that helped try and help other firefighters process what they saw. But for me, he never really talked to me much about it. It was sort of like, we're in it. I'll talk to other firefighters about it, but at home, we're at home and I'm not talking about it or dealing with it. And so, yeah, I think he did that like critical incident stress for maybe 10 or 15 years after the warehouse fire, where he went around to different departments and talked to other firefighters. But I don't know any of that. Like, I don't know what they talked about and I don't know what they did. Cause to me, he was that stern sort of like, let's move on. And what are you doing?
That's pretty progressive, though, to be part of the team that long ago. Because I would say most of us, if we put our hand on our heart, we really only started understanding or even beginning to understand this about 10 years ago. So you're talking 25 years ago, at least.
Yeah. And I think that, the warehouse fire affected my father so much. He was Paul Brotherton's partner, and through a series of strange events that night, he got bumped from being partners with Paul to driving the rescue, and Paul became partners with Jerry, and then they both passed away in the fire through a series of like moves that happened that were just so random. You heard about 9/11 too, right? Where it's like, oh, I overslept and then I did this and then my taxi was late and whatever. So I think it's impacted my father so greatly that he's and anyone that knows him, he's not a feely, sensitive guy. He's a hard dude. And so I think part of him wanted to let other hard dudes know, like, hey, I'm a real dude. Like, and you can talk to me and we can sort of have that. So it was almost one of those things where it affected him so much that he wanted to open up and help other guys that probably wouldn't talk to anyone else other than someone like him, and like I said, he doesn't talk about it in public. He didn't talk about it in the press. Super low key, would talk about it to other guys that went through some really bad shit too,
Yeah, I think it's amazing. I'm so glad that we
Yeah,
we kind of talked about that, because that's important. Because I mean, well, what I
yeah,
found when I early on was it was the air quotes tough guys that were the ones that are
yeah,
struggling the most. The guys with
for
the shaved
sure.
heads and the tattoos and the muscles,
Yeah,
because they felt that they had a part to play, and this kind of stone faced leader in the firehouse. And as we know now, 10 years later, the leader in the firehouse is the guy that can be all that, but also be vulnerable and open up and
100%.
open the door for someone else to ask for help.
Yeah, and I think that goes sort of across the board, right? Like I was an athlete my whole life. I played college football and like kind of in that passe era that's kind of gone now. But it was the same thing in the locker room, right? It's like we didn't do anything. We were never sensitive or cared or had any emotions. And like now the cool guy is the guy that is the tough guy, but also is like, hey man, if you got a problem, like come talk to me. We're cool. Like let's open up about stuff. And I've tried to live that lifestyle myself. I'm very open about mental health and the vast importance of atypical men being open about the importance of it.
What about the conversation in football with the head trauma and CTE? Because I
Yeah,
think we're seeing more and more now, not only depression, anxiety, suicide, but also
yeah,
ALS, which is devastating.
I know.
What level did you play football at, and have you had any kind of retroactive conversations about the impacts of that sport on your own mental health?
Oh, for sure. So, I mean, I played football from when I was 8 or 9 all the way through college. So, for a long time, I played football. And I was like, I was the hit with your head guy. Like that's all I had. I was like, I'm going to hit you so goddamn hard that like you don't know whatever. Like I wasn't talented. I wasn't, I was just like a psychopath. And so, there is a lot of that with me. Like the second I stopped playing football, I fell into a dark spot, anxiety, panic attacks, thought I was dying 24/7. And I think a lot of it has to do with not only that it's like your identity, right? Like I was a football player. And then after that, it's like, well, what the hell am I? I'm not a guy that sits in a cubicle, or I'm not good at, what am I good at now? Like I hit people, and that's all I was good at, is hitting people. So it's like you kind of lose yourself, but also I've had multiple diagrammed concussions. I've broken my nose 6 times. I broke my jaw. I've torn my Achilles. Like my body is wrecked. But my head, I would love to have some sort of progressive study where they could study CTE while you're still alive. Because right now, unfortunately, they can only see it after you pass away. And I know, not just myself, but a lot of the guys that I played with, there's definitely something going on where, I mean, man, I still deal with anxiety and panic attacks and depression. And it has to be with getting my brain rattled hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. Um, but I go back and do it again for absolutely. But like, but I do think that it's such an important thing that we take into consideration, especially at a young age. Like, would I do it again? Yeah. Do I think I would do it again when I was like 8 or 9, especially having like girls that are that age now and little kids? Like, probably not. But yeah, it's something that's vastly, much like this, vastly understudied. And I don't know if it's because people don't think that these sort of like traditional strong men need help. Because like it's the same with like military, fire service, police service, football, boxing. No one really studies like what are the long-term impacts that these gladiator sort of men have in their lives. Like I'm 40 now, and some days I wake up and like I can barely move, and it's like, yeah, no one told me that when I was in high school playing football. You know what I mean?
I've had this conversation with a lot of people on here, a lot of people that were athletes at a high level, college,
Yeah,
even pro, and then a lot of strength and conditioning and sports coaches as well.
yeah,
When I first moved to the States, I'll keep this short because people listen to a lot of the episodes. I've heard this story many times, but long
I
story
have.
short, after a while, I kept meeting what I would call the Uncle Ricos. Like these guys that were now like 30, either side of 30, very,
Could have won state.
deconditioned.
Yeah,
Yeah. And then, coulda, woulda, shoulda, if it wasn't for my
yeah,
ACL, my MCL, my, labrum. And I started, it wasn't then, but as I started getting into this, I started thinking, well, wait a second, what are we doing to our high school and college children? You know what I
yeah,
mean? As athletes. And you realize that there is a blurring of the lines between performance and wanting to win, a high school game, a
yeah,
college game, and the longevity and the responsibility for the well-being of the youth athlete. Because if you
Yeah.
break kids at 18, and now that affects their ability to stay in shape, their ability to be a soldier, a firefighter, whatever it is, because
Yeah.
you broke them as a child, that's irresponsible. So there's
Sure.
absolutely a middle ground. And actually, a lot of other countries have that middle ground because they don't squeeze every ounce of performance out of these children and then discard them when the new ones come. And then you see, this is an interesting point too, in those countries, adults continue to play sports and
Yeah.
therefore you retain a healthy population. We have this drop off from high
100.
level athletics to arguably a lot of sedentary activity and obesity and, back injuries and pain pills and all the other things. So
100%.
it's a conversation a lot of these more progressive, coaches are having now with youth athletes is, should a child be slamming their head into another child at, 16, 15
That's what
years
I
old?
mean.
And what is it benefiting? Yeah, we want a trophy that sits in a cabinet in a school that's getting dusty, but you potentially could have taken that person's life 10 years later.
Yeah. And I'm telling you, like, there's this aspect. I was talking to my wife about this not too long ago, right? She played college sports as well. And there's this aspect of like, I played with a lot of super talented people throughout the years, hundreds and hundreds of people. I played football and lacrosse, right? And I boxed. And like, how many of those people went pro? Literally zero. And I've seen, like you said, I've seen massive amounts of pain pills, injections, cortisone shots to get you out on the field when you're playing with like a blown out knee, steroid usage, right? For what? Like for what? As a 40-year-old man now, I'm sitting here and like, for what? Like why when I fractured my shin, right? I took a helmet to the shin and they ended up putting this like metal rod outside of my leg and giving me like cortisone shots to keep playing. And I did. And I'm looking back and I'm like, why did I not just like heal my leg? Like now I wake up and I'm like limping at 40 years old for like a D3 football game. I'm like, this makes no sense. It really doesn't. And like, it's the parents too, though, right? Like pushing the kid. My parents never, ever, ever pushed me into any type of athletic. I enjoyed it, but like parents pushing their kids of like, you're going to play basketball year round every single day for 15 years. It's like, you know how many of those kids go pro? None. And like, maybe I would take steroids if they said, hey, you're going to get $40 million this year. I'd go, sure, juice me up. It's worth it for me. But like, other than that, I don't know, man. It is an interesting conversation. I didn't see it going this way, but it is interesting to have,
Well, from the brain health point of view, we're seeing a lot of exciting things when it comes to psilocybin and ibogaine. Have you looked down those paths at all?
I have, man. I was at a point that was so low, sort of during the COVID era, that I looked into everything. I looked into psychedelics. I looked into like brain waves. I looked into rapid eye movement therapy. Like I was like, something's wrong. I will do anything for it not to be wrong. And I think there's a lot to that psilocybin, and I think there's a lot to sort of that whole field. The field I ended up going down was I did clinical hypnosis, and it changed my life, literally changed my life. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not again, dude, I went vegan for 3 years trying to like figure out if it was like some sort of chemical imbalance, which ended up just giving me kidney stones because I ate too many cruciferous vegetables, which raised my oxalate levels. So like, I mean, I think there's a lot of options that are outside of traditional medicine. Right now I pay out of pocket for a primary care that's not in the medical system. Cause I think much like we were talking about in the fire department, medicine relies on, we're going to wait until you're sick to try and fix you. And I'm like, why don't we try and make me healthy so that I don't get sick?
It's really interesting you say that because I'm starting to see now the fire departments that were absolutely crumbling, that have lent into proactive initiatives like changing the work week, which is kind of weird for people in Worcester to hear because they're already working a week that, whatever it is, 90% of America would love to.
They weren't though, James. And I saw that with my father. And that's a little bit what I talked about very early on. When he would come into that schedule of like the 2 days on, 3 days off, 2 nights on, 1 day off, or whatever it was, he was mentally wrecked almost constantly because he never had time to reacclimate to the regular world. And especially after those like 2 nights, he sometimes wouldn't be himself again until right when he was about to go back to work.
I have people push back on the 24/72. Well, if it's that hard, then just do 12. So it's like, well, you shows nothing
Yeah,
about
you
wellness
can't.
and sleep medicine,
Yep.
because when you go
Yeah.
back and forth days and nights, your circadian rhythm is completely screwed up.
It's whacked. He would be falling asleep at noontime, then like waking up, and then couldn't sleep all night long. He'd be up. I remember him. He'd be up like watching the news, like trying to get a drink or something to help himself go to sleep. Like it, not like alcohol, but like he'd be like up like drinking water and pacing around the house and you'd be like, "What's going on, man?" He's like, "I don't know. Like I'm all messed up." And yeah, it was whacked. And so unless you like study the science or have lived with someone that's been doing it, don't even bother. Like, I don't even want to talk to you.
Yeah, exactly. But what's interesting is now we can use that almost as a petri dish for the rest of the country. Because if we're talking about the wellness of the nation, you put more rest and recovery into the fire service, they start getting better. You put fitness standards in, they start getting better.
Yeah.
You give them access to mental health tools, they get even better. And now you're layering these. And I'm excited because I think there's going to be a case for the American healthcare system once some of these departments really start gleaning the results to show them, look, you don't need more taxpayers' money. You need to invest in the health of the nation, and therefore you will save money in all the disease care that we have at the moment.
100%, James. I say it in the film. I say it in a lot of interviews. I don't know if it has to be taxpayer money. I don't know why insurance companies aren't paying for initiatives like this. They're the ones footing the bill for the massive amounts of health issues that are falling on the fire department and these first responders. If I had a health insurance company, I'd be like, hey, you know what I'm going to do? Start doing some proactive initiatives for these fire departments so that we don't have to deal with the fallout. Kathy says it great in the movie. It costs a lot to hire a firefighter. It costs a lot to train a firefighter. And it costs even more to bury a firefighter and pay the family afterwards. And that doesn't have to be the case. But like right now, that's just the normal thing. They're disposable entities. I was talking to a guy literally yesterday in Worcester as we were going around to the stations, and he said, sadly, right now, the people in power see us as cheaper to just bury and get rid of and rehire a new guy than to keep us. That's literally what it boils down to.
There's so many myths when it comes to the financial side. And I was just talking to someone about this today. I don't understand how these CFOs of these cities and these counties aren't looking at their budget sheets and going, well, wait a second, here's where we're bleeding the money, because I'm an expert in finance. That's why I get paid six figures and wearing this tie and have this award on my desk.
Yeah.
I should be able to say, okay, well, overtime, retention, recruitment, workers' comp premiums, as you said, the insurance, these medical retirements that we're paying out for, line of duty death payments, lawsuits when they make mistakes. There are hundreds of millions of dollars, tens of millions, depending on the size of the department, that is being wasted. I'm just going to say, all right, well, then what initiatives can we use to front load this money? Well, the 24/72, if you're not already working a 42-hour work week, that's a big piece. Fitness standards, as we'll get to, the conditions of the stations, gyms in the stations, access to mental health. And now you're layering all the things that were costing you a shitload of money. Your seats are all full, your stations are all full, the response time goes up, the sick pay usage goes down.
The morale goes up of the department, right?
Exactly. Which again is the best recruitment tool. If people enjoy working there, they stay there. So this false economy just comes up over and over and over again. And people will say to me, well, James, it's cheaper to hire, pay overtime than it is to hire another firefighter. And I'm like, well, firstly, fuck you for even having that response, because these are people that need to go home to their families 100%. As you do. But you're so arrogant that you'll go home at 5 p.m. every weekday and you're telling that firefighter, well, you can't go home to your family because in my mind, it's cheaper. Secondly, it's bullshit, because if you look at the downstream costs, it's not cheaper at all. It costs you a shitload more money to break people. So that is a complete myth that needs to be debunked. The most ethical, first and most importantly, also fiscally responsible way of running a fire department is having all the seats full of people that are well rested, held to a fitness standard, and get to go home to their family when they're supposed to go home to their family. That is the most financially efficient way of running a fire department.
Without question, right? Without question. And there's a huge aspect to like the mental health of the department too, right? Like Worcester, is working on, but not yet implemented silent stations, right? I was there because we embedded with these guys during the film. So I was there with them, riding on the trucks, living with them, eating with them, all of it, right? I can tell you, I went effing berserk in that station hours at a time, hearing every call from every station in every truck throughout the city over and over again. By the time we were done, I was like, I cannot freaking think straight. I am rattled right now. Every time someone calls for like they fell and hurt their leg, the station's like, what? Engine three. And it's like over and over all day and all night long. I couldn't imagine having sustained that for an overtime shift. If you're working 3 24-hour shifts in a row of just bam, 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 every literal 5 minutes, do you think, what does that do to your cortisol? What does that do to your, why do you think they're having goddamn heart attacks? It's like every 5 minutes you're jumping out of your seat. I talked to a guy yesterday at one of the Worcester departments that said, I jump when I hear a printer because it's like a similar tone to the bell. He's like, and it's embarrassing. He's like, I'll be at a hotel or something, a printer, and I'm like, he's like, because we're like a dog that is getting hit. And when you hear that so often, every day thinking, am I going out? Am I going out? Is this me? Is this me? My dad has nightmares about it still. He's been retired now for 15 years. He says, I wake up in the middle of the night, Tommy, jump up out of bed because I'm afraid that I'm missing a call. I'll hear the thing go off, and I jump up and I'm afraid I'm missing the truck. He's like, and I literally get up and I can't go back to sleep for the rest of the night because I'm like, my adrenaline is spiked through the roof. That's a guy that's been retired for 15 years. How insane is that to do to a human being? Doesn't have to be that way.
No, I mean, having the whole city's calls on the radio is pure insanity. Having even other rigs calls, like there's the chief says, the battalion chief, well, I need to have the radio on all the time in case they need me. And you realize, okay, this is, again, big boy, big girl pants. Yeah. If they need you, they will call you. You are not that important that you need to be listening all the time. Yep. So the only people that should hear a call in a good fire station are the actual people on the vehicle that have got the call. If the rescue gets a call 4 times and the engine sleeps all night, even though they'll give each other shit the next morning over coffee, it's a good thing because the engine didn't need to wake up for those. And if they need 100%. The engine, they'll call them and then they send them too. So to do 100%. That, as you hear sometimes for the whole city, is pure lunacy. And if you look at progressive departments now, they have technology like Ease Alert, and I'm going to give them a shout out, where it's a wearable. So it's not even an audible tone. It wakes them up that they're vibrating on the bed or on their wrist. And so they get up, everyone in the bunk room, if it is communal, sleeps through it. Ideally, you have these individual dorms now, which again, you got to make sure people use the communal space during the day so they're not isolating themselves. But yeah, to get away from A, you're not that important. They'll call you if you need you. Yeah. And B, if it's not your call, you should not hear any tones at all. Full stop.
Yeah, I mean, especially for a department the size of Worcester, right? It's the second biggest city in New England. There's hundreds and hundreds of calls a day. It's not like they get one call every 6 weeks. These guys are like going in and out all day long. And it was, for me, drove me nuts. I was like, I could not do this.
Well, let's get back onto your timeline then and walk through to the film. So firstly, when you were a young man, was joining the fire service on the radar? Were you dissuaded because of your family, or was there another story behind it?
I mean, I took the test when I was like 18, and they went into a group and they just randomly picked people, and I wasn't picked. So I never got on, but I don't think I could have. I never wanted to. I always wanted to act and make films. That's what I wanted to do since I was a little kid. But because I sat at the table with my dad and my uncles every single day, I think I was jaded. I don't think it would have been good for me. I think I would have got on and I would have been like a 30-year veteran in my first year. I'd be like, oh, that guy's a piece of shit and I don't like that guy. And it's like, I don't think I could have done it. Also, it's really hard. I know a lot of legacy, including a big amount of the Worcester Six's children are now firefighters. But for me, it would have been really hard to try and fill the boots of my dad and my uncles. They had good reputations. They were tough guys. They were real guys. And do I think I could have done it? Yeah. Did I want to be in the shadow of giants my whole life? No, I don't think I could have done it. So I think the world works out the way it does because I've always loved the fire department with my whole heart, that I got put in the right place to do what my role is, which is to be the mouthpiece for these men and women that aren't fighting for themselves. Because my dad and my uncles were all tough wise asses. I'm a tough wise ass with a bullhorn now. So like I feel like I'm in the right place at the right time, and this is where I belong.
How did you find yourself in the acting space?
So in 2006, I was able to, I was in a film, and I was lucky enough to get upgraded, and I became a must join into the Screen Actors Guild. So I joined the Screen Actors Guild in 2006, and I started getting parts in small movies. I mean, big movies, but small parts in big movies, and really just kind of fell in love with it. It's something I always wanted to do. I mean, I have videos of me when I'm 2 years old saying like, "Hey, I'm Maverick from Top Gun. I'm Doc Holliday." Like I was an only child, so like I found solace and I found peace in watching movies and connecting with these characters and actors, and so it's something that's been a part of me. I don't think I found acting. I think I always was that. I think it's just something that I was, and I ended up having some luck. And I think it takes luck and hard work, and I've had both. So that's how I ended up doing what I do.
What were some of the films that you were in?
I was in The Social Network, 21, the movie The Fighter. I was in The Finest Hours with Casey Affleck and Chris Pine. So yeah, I've done a bunch of movies where if you watch it, you'll go like, oh, there he is. I remember him. He has one line or two lines in these. So yeah, it's kind of funny, but it's been a very awesome and rewarding and difficult and journey so far.
I went to drama school when I was in England. Cool. Yeah, so cool. I entered that realm, but I've told this on there a few times. What I found, I had a showcase, I had William Morris interested in me, but when they came, they said to me, well, you wouldn't be in my department though, so let us know when you get a role and we'll send the right person to come watch. Well, what I didn't realize in London in, whatever it was, 99, was that if you didn't have an agent, you couldn't get a role. And if you didn't have a role, you couldn't get an agent. And I was stuck in this revolving door.
The whole thing is that, man, that's the entire industry. It's like you can't join the Screen Actors Guild unless you have a Screen Actors Guild credit, but you can't get a credit in a movie unless you're in the Screen Actors Guild, right? So it's like everything in the industry is that way, which is why around 2020, I decided I'm going to start making my own films. I'm going to do it the way that I think is the right way. And I'm going to work with good people. I have a no assholes policy, James. I only work with people that prove to be good people, and started doing my own thing. And I said, you know what? I think I can make kind of a sustainable little film economy right here in central Massachusetts with the right partners and team where, I'm kind of outside. I'll still audition for stuff, and I've still gotten some parts and stuff, but like, I'm not reliant on them. I'm reliant on myself to do what I need to do in order to grow this sort of little film economy that we have going here.
Talk to me about that a little bit more. I'm developing a TV adaptation of my book that I wrote a couple of years ago.
Oh, amazing.
And just like the podcast, just like the books, rather than, well, let me do it the way other people are doing it, I'm like, well, let me just do it the way that I want to do it and not really look at anyone else's and see if it ends up being something different.
For sure.
And having a lot of people on here recently, I just had Justin Eaton, who's a stuntman, was on the Avengers and Fall Guy and some of these other ones. And hearing these people talking about how Hollywood is changing and the streaming and, how some of these, YouTubers are starting to make films. I just watched Obsession this last couple of days. Incredible film. And the budget was like 700,000. It is changing now. So what are you excited about as far as the path that you've chosen to say, all right, I'm just going to, kind of like Billy Bob Thornton when he wrote his script, I'm just going to do it my way.
Yeah, I think it opens up the doors for creators like us, right? Like, I think there's something to be said of like needing to learn how to color in the lines before you color outside the lines. And I've put my time in, I've put my dues in, I've done the agency and Hollywood path. And we've found that if you can make content that is of high quality, and you can supplement it with some named people that are involved, there is an appetite for investors to invest in local stuff. Now, am I raising $5 million budgets? No, I'm trying to do the same thing that you just mentioned, Obsession. Like, we started with a $10,000 short film. Then we moved to a $50,000 film. Then we moved to and now we're trying to do like a $250,000 film, right? Where we can provide our investors like, hey, here's a sustainable path to making some money back. And here are the tax incentives that you get for participating in something like this. And there really is the opportunity. Nothing is getting greenlit in Hollywood now that's an original story. Everything is like Fast and the Furious 37 because they're just playing these safe cards. So like, if you have good original content, there's a market, that backrooms obsession that these people are catapulting onto. There's thousands of independent films now that are making a ton of money. People don't understand. You don't have to make $700 billion and be the Avengers to have a profitable film. If you raise $250,000, a $500,000 film is incredibly profitable for your investors and for your team, because all you have to do is have like a limited kind of regional theatrical run, and you can do that and then sign some sort of like streaming deal, right? So there's yearly thousands and thousands of films that nobody has ever heard of and maybe never seen that are making a ton of money because they find avenues for profitability, even if they sell it into like the India market or the Russian market. Like, it's a worldwide market. So I did a perfect example. I did a commercial for FYE, the old kind of like record store, right?
Mm-hmm. We still have one.
Oh, good.
Oh,
and
I think we did. I don't know if it's still.
I don't know, man. That must be a tough business to be in now. It's like a blockbuster video, right? But so it ages. You can tell how old I am. So I did a commercial for that, and I got paid residuals on it, right? I never saw the commercial to this day. I don't even know where to find it. I don't know how to find it. So if someone's watching, they can find me in an FYE commercial. Please send it my way. I made a bunch of money on that because it went bonkers over in like Vietnam and Japan. And so I was making money, but no one ever, all my friends were like, dude, that's a fake thing. I'm like, whatever, I don't care. Like, I'm getting paid on it. So there's a lot of ways to make money in film, James, that like people just don't understand. Everything on every streaming service around the world is some sort of profit for the people that are involved.
The thing that's driving me, the story is, it's kind of multifaceted. It gives a real insight into who we are, what we do. Because on the dramatized side, really we have soap operas for
for sure. Yeah,
you know what I mean?
That was my dining room table. My grandmother's dining room table. It was like a great soap opera every week, every day.
Yeah, exactly. So you have the kind of Chicago Fire element, or you have Tacoma FD, where we're all buffoons. So no one's really seen like the fire/EMS, raw, gritty fire service story on television. But then there's a multi-generational trauma story. So now you go into the mental health side, and then also the way that we see the world. Like, it's such a valuable set of eyes to see the world through a firefighter's eyes. See everything that everyone sweeps under the carpet: the homelessness, the addiction, the sex work, the gang membership, all the things. And again, it's a story of redemption. It's a story of hope. It's not just sad, even though we inhabit a pretty sad world sometime.
Yeah.
But then there's another accompanying piece I'm going to do, which is going to really then pull some takeaways and create solutions for people in the real world that are watching. This little rectangle is a window to so many places on the planet that you could actually impart kindness, compassion, healing, community. And I think when you've seen the World Cup and the community that's come out of that, when you see the international response to the Venezuela earthquakes, which I've been talking about a lot recently, I think there's a yearning for that too. So money aside, even though of course, it needs to be funded, it needs to pay the cast and crew.
Yeah.
My thing is, putting something that when people have hit stop at the end of the series, now in the Firehouse table, they're having these deep conversations. So, did you know about this thing? It's called Ibogaine, or did you know that, if you get in ketosis, it can help with the chemo, with your cancer, or, whatever the things are that we hit. Yeah. And now you've used not only the power of story, but as in with your documentary, then takeaways that people feel like they've actually really, really resonated with the story. So rather than simply be entertained, 100%. Use story to actually, improve people's lives.
Yeah, that's what the ketosis made me laugh, because I'm on day 2 of my 3-day water fast right now. So I'm a big believer in that also. But that's what I tried to do with my film as well, right? Is like create a conversation, which it actually has across all platforms now. We have about 800,000 views on just the trailer alone. And I've gotten thousands of messages from firefighters across the world saying, like, come to Queensland, Australia. It's just like that here. Come to, San Francisco. You wouldn't believe our firehouses. Come to Arkansas. And it's like, oh my God, this is a conversation starter. So my goal is to get this seen by as many people as possible, not for profit, not for my own self. I don't care if I don't care if anybody in the world knows that I made this movie. I want the movie to be seen for what you just said. I want conversations to open up. My goal after shooting this and kind of really boiling down, like, what is this, was that it's not about the buildings. It's about the people in the buildings. And at the end of the day, like you said just a minute ago about your project, these men and women are heroes. They're firefighters, they're heroes. But what I wanted to show was that they're humans. It's my dad. It's your brother. It's your uncle or husband. Like, at the end of the day, my father and my uncle won Firefighter of the Year award, and they were widely celebrated. But when they came home, he's my dad. And he has a lot on his shoulders, and he's broken, and it's sad. And that's what I tried to show, is like, yeah, they're all heroes. We know that, but they're humans, and we need to take care of these people. They're people.
How did this even start? What was the genesis of this production?
Yeah. So, again, Diane Cotter, the amazing Diane, reached out to Kathy Crosby Bell, who's the founder of the Last Call Foundation. Her son, Michael Kennedy, was tragically killed in the fire in Back Bay in 2014. He was a firefighter that got trapped in the basement, and the fire burned through his fire hose, and he was left with no escape. And Kathy didn't realize that there was a filmmaker in Massachusetts that had fire department family. So really, this has been a year and a half, almost 2-year long project now, because the initial phase was, much like anyone in the fire department or associated with the fire department, a sussing out process of who is this guy, what are his actual intentions, right? So a lot of it was Kathy and I kind of connecting and realizing who we both were. Then she came to me with the proposal to do sort of a 15-minute short film on the conditions of a firehouse. And I agreed to it, and we signed a contract, and we started shooting the film. And after my first day of shooting, I called Kathy and Jason Burns, who's the executive director, also a Fall River firefighter. And I said, guys, like, I'm not going to ask you for another penny for this entire tenure, but this is not a 15-minute short film about the building. This is a feature-long movie about the men and women dealing with the features of the buildings. And so we kind of agreed to, like, hey, let's push this. I said, I need this to be seen. I need these men and women to be heard. And no one's going to watch a short film, unfortunately. I said, what's your favorite short film, James?
I don't have one.
Yeah, exactly. You don't know, right? But if you say what's your favorite documentary or what's your favorite movie, people know. So I said, we need people to see this. So let's make this a feature-length movie. Let's go to multiple departments. Let's kick the doors in as much as we can. We ended up filming in Worcester, Fall River, and Westwood, all in Massachusetts, which are 3 very different size departments, different socioeconomic condition departments, in all the same issue. And after posting this trailer, it's a national pandemic. This is not, so the movie is a much wider problem, using 3 Massachusetts firehouses and communities as examples of this much larger issue.
You start with Worcester itself, so let's talk about that first. I mean, I've worked in such a diverse spectrum of firehouses. The last place I worked was the one that protects Disney, so you can imagine pretty beautiful firehouse. But even Anaheim, California has some great firehouses, they're new ones. But then I've also worked in trailers. I've worked in places where I absolutely, could tell I was just getting ill after every single shift, mold and all the other things, asbestos probably. So talk to me about what you started to see at the very beginning when you were just focusing on Worcester.
Yeah, so for me, Worcester became a sort of surreal coming home moment, right? I was stepping foot into the same station that my uncle Jim worked in, my uncle Cliffy worked in, and passed away from there. So for me, stepping into Worcester was jarring because I had kind of been separate from that. I'd been doing the movie stuff and I hadn't really been that entwined with the fire department for the last 20 years. Um, the impact it had on me initially was walking in and seeing that the station was exactly the same as it was the last time I was in there 30 years ago. And I went like, this is nuts. Like nothing's changed. There's nothing better about it. There's no upgrades done to it. There's no infrastructure changes, even though there's all the new information out there that we know that we didn't have in the 90s that we have now. That was my first reaction, was like, this is nuts. That like almost, James, to the point where like I could swear it was like the same chair that my uncle sat in 25 years. Like they're like not even an upgrade of any piece of anything in there. The cots that the men sleep on when they work overnight are literally World War II surplus bedding, metal framed cots from 1945. It's like you couldn't, none of that could be upgraded in the time I had been here. You know, asbestos tiles that were cracked, asbestos hanging from the ceilings, mold everywhere. And so, yeah, for me, it was kind of a surreal coming home. And it would be like, if I can make it like anything that is not fire related, it would have been like walking in back into your high school at a 30-year reunion and being like, oh my God, they didn't even paint the lockers since I was here 30 years ago. That's what it would have felt like.
In contrast, because obviously the private sector is hard to compare because it's profit based and all that stuff,
Sure.
what were you seeing as far as the condition of other government buildings, like the admin, for example?
Well, I mean, that's hilarious, right? Like you walk in, we did that in Fall River, I think, in a pretty funny way, but it's like Fall River had just like they're in Worcester too. City Hall. Let's take City Hall, for example. It's like marble staircases, giant flooring, polished everything, like beautiful statues. Then you go to the firehouse and it's like the men and women take care of the station. So I said this previously, like the floor is clean. I could see myself in the floor. That's how much pride they have in the fire department. And we have footage of it. You can see it in the movie. You can see reflections of the camera in the flooring, but the flooring is made up of cracked asbestos tiles. So it's like, what good is that? What good is polishing a floor that's cancerous and killing you, right? And we know that. It's drastic compared to other city buildings. There's no other building, private or public sector, would be allowed to operate in the condition that these firehouses are allowed to operate in. Hands down, no question about it.
Of the buildings that weren't firehouses, were there any other buildings where people slept the night in them?
No. And that's another false comparison that people make oftentimes too, right? They're like, oh, well, it's like a school or it's like the police department. It's like, it's not. It's different. This is a different entity. These men and women live in these fire stations. They don't come here to work. They live in them. And by the way, if you do out the math over a career, a lot of times they spend more time at the firehouse than they do at home. Even with the current scheduling, even with people saying, oh, you should work more overtime, they live in the stations more than they live with me. Like, so when I was a kid, my dad was gone more than he was at home. And he was living, sleeping, eating, working out, everything at these firehouses. It's a firehouse. It's not a station.
Well, and the reason I ask that is for that very point. So you're not, enduring poor conditions, but you get to walk out at 5.
For sure.
Like you are there for a full 24. You're breathing it. You're being exposed to the, sewage backing up, or the fact that your bay is right next to the kitchen or the bunk room, and you're getting all the diesel fumes coming in. That's a 24-hour exposure.
100%.
So that's
you're eating breakfast, lunch,
arguably
and dinner.
Yeah, 3 times what a regular work day would be.
Yep, 100%. And that's something that's obvious when you're embedded with these men and women. You're seeing that, like, this is their house. They're living here right now.
I don't know, because the film that I just saw, obviously, I think you're still in the editing process. Have I got that right? Yeah. So there was a kind of switch where you go from Worcester to Fall River, and it was regarding the Gabriel House on July 14th. Oh, but it wasn't explained what that event was in the current cut. So what even made you look at Fall River, and talk to me about that fire?
Yeah, so we had contacts with the Fall River Fire Department, and while we were filming Worcester, just by pure whatever it may be, the Gabriel House fire happened. And so we were there live watching this tragedy unfold, where, if you don't know, I think it's up to 12 now victims died in this house in Fall River that was an assisted living facility. Fall River was vastly understaffed that day. I did another documentary for the IAFF on that, by the way, a short film that's more for internal use only, but vastly understaffed the day of the fire. And if they weren't, a lot of this wouldn't have happened. The craziest thing, James, and you can go back and look, the president of the Fall River Fire Department Union, Michael Regan, who's in our other film, like a week or less than a week before the Gabriel House fire, went to City Hall at the city council meeting and said, "We are vastly understaffed. This is incredibly dangerous. People are going to die if you don't do something about this." And he got very passionate about it. And they actually made him stop talking and asked him to leave. Lo and behold, less than 4 or 5 days later, the Gabriel House happened. So again, no one doing anything until tragedy. Now they're going, "Oh, well, we have 4 men on a truck now and we're getting the staffing underway." Yeah, I bet you are. I bet you are. But Michael Regan, you can look this up. It's public record. I have the video, was in City Hall on the 10th or the 8th and was like, "People are going to die if this doesn't get fixed. We can't respond in time to these places." They were making incredibly complex rescues of assisted living folks who are physically, mentally disabled, that would take 10, 15 men to rescue one person. And when you're on the fire ground and there's 20 less men than should be there, that's people dying. That's literally people dying, whether it's firefighters because they're overexerting themselves trying to make these rescues, or it's citizens because the buildings are going up in record time with these new construction materials and there's not enough men to save you fast enough. That is death, without a doubt. And I'm not being over dramatic. I don't care what anyone says.
No, I agree with you completely. And it's interesting, with a lot of the country, they are shorthanded because of the refusal to acknowledge what's turning young people away from our profession. And this is what's happening in Florida now. They're changing that. And lo and behold, surprise, surprise, they've got lines around the building with experienced firefighters wanting to join their department now. What were you seeing as far as what was causing the lower staffing in Fall River specifically? Was it a lack of application? Was it just purely budget cuts?
I think it's a little bit of both, right? I mean, there's a great quote from Kathy in the film where she says, a lot of young men and women now too, when they're kids, they want to be firefighters when they grow up. But when you see the conditions they live in, you see the way they're treated, you see the statistics on the cancer-causing materials and death rates of cancer, which is rampant through the fire department. Would you still want to be a firefighter? I wouldn't. I'd much rather be a filmmaker. There's no way, right? So when they're starting to be proactive, like you said, and starting to tackle these things head on, I think you're going to see recruitment go through the roof. Then it's up to the cities and municipalities to say, are we willing to fund what is needed? So I think it's a double-edged sword. I think you're not getting people applying because they go, "You know what? I'd rather be in sales." Why wouldn't I? Right. But once you sort of combat that, then it goes to the city and it's like, okay, now we have applicants. Are you going to hire them?
Yeah. And again, it's that proactive thing where I'm sure if you look back now and look at the lawsuits, if there are any, for losing, 12 residents in a fire, and if it's led back to understaffing at the fire service or the city itself, then could that have funded the extra bodies that you need? And I would imagine absolutely. So again,
you brought
get
that
ahead
up in
of
the
it.
beginning. And Kathy says that too, and I fully agree. These lawsuits should be brought out into the public. They should be widely televised and covered. They shouldn't be backroom handshake deals. How much do we pay out in lawsuits for all these people that died in Fall River? Would that have covered 10 more guys? I bet it would. Would that cover fixing some of the asbestos abatement in these buildings? I bet it would. I know in Worcester right now, with police and fire lawsuits that are out there for wrongful deaths and situations. I think, and I don't want to be misquoted, somewhere around 35 or 40 million dollars last year spent on lawsuits. That's a lot of bodies for the police and the fire department.
Exactly.
That should be out in the public. That should be widely televised on the news. That's a lacking of judgment. Yeah.
100%. Well, that's a good segue. So the assumption is also made, well, the city's not very affluent. You know, you hear of some of these places around the country where, yeah, I mean, the city is struggling. And again, the response is still proactive spending. But you then transition in the film to Westwood, a very affluent community. So talk to me, the assumption then is, well, okay, let's show you a beautiful fire station now.
Yeah.
What did you find in Westwood?
I mean, honest to God, James, right? When I told the crew where we were going next, and in my own mind, I was like, this is gonna, like, are we even gonna be able to use this in the movie? Because, like, yeah, we're going to Westwood. If you're from Massachusetts, you know. If you're not, let me tell you, the average house price in Westwood is $1.2 million and up, right? Like, Westwood is where all the athletes live, all the sports teams live, all the, you know, high ranking doctors and officials live in Westwood, because it's about 15, 20 minutes outside of Boston, and it's a suburb. So when we went there, the first thing we did after we went to the firehouse, I said, get the drone. We're going to fly this over all the houses in Westwood. And so I wanted the people to see these houses have 7-car garages. They're 12,000 square feet. They're as big as firehouses, right? 12,000 square feet, 14,000 square feet, 7-8-car garages. And their firehouse is embarrassing. It is being held up, the apparatus bay floor, and if you're not familiar, is where the trucks park, being held up by temporary shoring that was put in 2014, that is bending and breaking. There's spalling concrete everywhere, holes in the floor where you can see the rebar and look down, that are 6 feet wide. The side wall of the building is separating from the back wall of the building, so it's not even connected. They had a tarp covering part of the building so that the rain pours in to the building on the tarp and then goes down into a drain, which all just pours into the basement, which is also a floor, by the way. It's not a basement. It's where their shop is to fix trucks and gear. So now they have to do that outside because they can't do it in the area that it was supposed to be done. There was bugs. There was mold everywhere. Their fire alarms were pulled down because the water leaked so bad onto the ceiling that the town's solution was just take the fire alarms down because they keep shorting out. So we're in a firehouse that doesn't have fire alarms because they were told to just pull them down because it's a fire hazard. Your fire alarm's a fire hazard, right? Now, 2 times in a row, this affluent town has voted down the building of a new station because they didn't want their taxes to go up $300 a year. So that's what they think of their firefighters in Westwood. I was appalled, more than Worcester, more than Fall River. I was appalled at Westwood. And by the way, since wrapping filming, because of some of the reels that I've posted, I've gotten 40, 50, 100,000 views. They sent an architect in and they shut down the apparatus bay floor. And now the firefighters are operating out of a tent in a parking lot because they're still not giving them a new station. But now the architect said, yeah, they were right. This is absolutely insane. So now the station shut down and the men and women are operating out of a tent. Hopefully they get it fixed before wintertime.
One of the problems that I've talked about a lot is the disconnection between what the public thinks we do and what we actually do.
For sure.
And, you know, everyone is to blame. We're to blame for not telling the story the way it is. The public is to blame by not just taking a moment and actually asking, what are they, you know, or questioning themselves. Oh, there's always a fire engine with the ambulance, you know, maybe they do medical calls too. You know, to be asked why you on a medical call in 2026 means that you've had a head up your ass for like 20 years because we've done this for a long time.
Forever, yeah.
But we've done a terrible job of telling our story. And I think going back to this is one of the reasons why I want to put out what I'm putting out is people will finally see what we actually do. And I hope it will help move the needle in a lot of departments getting the funding and the support that they need. But, you know, there's so much ignorance about it. And we also perpetuate it with some of the resistance that I've had with things like, well, I have the greatest job in the world. I got all this time off. Whereas, for a 42-hour work week, I would argue, yeah, you've got the same amount of time off as
Yeah.
a civilian. You don't have more. The math ain't mathing.
That's
But
what I'm saying. Math is not math, and you're spending more time away from home than the regular worker also.
yeah, but then you go to the 56-hour work week and the understaffed department. Now you're working 80 hours. You're nowhere near that. But you still
100%.
are saying, oh, it's the greatest job. It's like we also have to stop saying that and say, look, it's the most incredible calling. But the way that we are being worked and the conditions that we're living in are not the most incredible things, and they have to be
Yeah,
fixed.
for
Because,
sure.
I had guy Jason Earl on the show a few years ago now, who's like a mold expert and talking about all the diseases, respiratory, autoimmune. I mean, all these
Yeah.
things. I mean, it is dangerous to be in there with mold. It's dangerous to be in there with
Without a doubt.
asbestos.
Without a
So
doubt. James, one thing that's interesting, and I don't mean to cut you off here, but I have to touch on this point. One thing that rang true, and I didn't even put it all in the film because it would have become incredibly redundant. Every person I talked to in every station, whether it be Worcester, Fall River, or Westwood, they all said what you just said. And they took it as it just is what it is. They all said, every time I wake up at this station, I get like a sore throat and a cold. My nose is stuffy. Every time we wake up, I'm coughing. I don't feel good. Every person said that. There was not a single person that I interviewed that did not mention, when I wake up at the station, my head feels kind of swollen. I feel out of it. I have a sore throat. My lymph nodes are swollen. And I was like, is that like normal to you? Because that's not how you should be waking up. Like, you're sick. Like, that station's making you sick. And they're all just like, oh yeah, it is what it is. They call it the Station 1 flu or the South Division flu or whatever. It's like, that's not good. That's not a good thing to be thinking about.
no, absolutely not. And I think this is the point: is if we just keep leaning into, yeah, suck it up, it is what it is, greatest job in the world, then nothing gets fixed. And you keep getting
Yeah.
it overlooked and you keep getting your budget trimmed more and more and more and working with, doing more with less. But in the meantime, you're going to funerals and you're burying people from
100%.
cancer, from
Yeah.
suicide, from, you're seeing the divorces, you're seeing the alcoholism. And it's not, a victim story. It's just, this is why you're doing what you're doing and I'm doing what I'm doing, is once you identify the problems and the contributing factors, then you can pick it apart and say, well, then we can fix that. We can change the
100%.
work week. We can condemn the station and demand that it's
Yep.
changed, whatever the thing is. But if we just keep, as we saying, it is what it is, and that's the mentality, then we'll keep getting what we keep getting because we're not pushing back. And I always tell people, if we had the lack of courage on the fire ground that we do fighting for our own rights, our own, or our own family, more to the
Yeah.
point, no fire would ever go out. You'd be like, oh no,
100%.
it's really hot. What are we going to
Don't
do?
worry
I
about
don't
it.
know. Well, it is what it is. Let's get back on the truck. So we're so good
100%.
operationally, we've got to take that same courage and determination and apply it to the things that are broken in our profession.
100%. And like I've said this about the film, and you've watched it, right? I'm not pointing out a bad guy. I'm not laying blame. I'm showing the conditions and saying, why are we not all in agreement that this is ludicrous? Why are we not all in agreement that 80% of line of duty deaths should not be cancer related? That's absurd. Who's here to argue against me? I guess you're the bad guy if you are, but like, I'm not pointing out anybody. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm saying should be widely accepted as absurd. Why are we not fixing it? And I've been saying, like, if you're opposed to it or you think you're the bad guy, then maybe you are the bad guy. I don't know. I'm not that's for you to look in the mirror and decide yourself, not for me to say. But I mean, some of the comments you see or people arguing against it, it's like, hey, maybe you're the problem. It's not me. I didn't plant any of these conditions. I didn't make the men or women say anything in the film. I simply showed it. Let you decide.
Yeah, and the people that you have in the film, they're busy stations. They're rescue
Yeah,
crews. I mean, these are people that are walking the walk, working in
for sure. These are
in
the
poor
real deal.
areas. Yeah, so they're not crying about what it is. They're just saying this
Yep.
is what it is. And again, if we go back to the professional athlete, the people that live
Yeah.
in, was it Westwood?
Yeah.
Do they, show me their locker rooms, show me their strength and conditioning,
Exactly.
how many hours sleep do they get, and then you're adoring them, and you would lose your mind if they lost the NFL, the Super Bowl, because you found out they didn't sleep 3 times that week. But the person who's waking up at 3 a.m. to save your child from a 3rd floor bedroom, you're fine with that person not sleeping, or, breathing
100%.
in mold and barely be able to breathe the SCBA because they've got a respiratory infection because of their station.
Yeah. How many knuckleheads do you see in the stands cheering for the Patriots, and they don't go, hey, they got a lot of time off in that off season, right? They're like, no, they're making $150 million and working 16 weeks. And they're going like, yeah, I'm a huge supporter of you. Then they go to the firefighters like, you guys should work more overtime. I was thinking about that when you said it earlier about how you have the same amount of time off as the average civilian, or potentially less. And people are always like, well, you should be working more. You have the best schedule in the world. And you know what my first thought was after all we had talked about? Is like, you better enjoy those days off, because you're going to not have a goddamn retirement, because you're going to die. So you better enjoy the time off you have while you're on the job. So soak it up, go fishing or something on your day off. But a lot of them are working another job because they can't afford to live on the amount of money they have from the fire department alone.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the salary is a big part. The other thing is, and this really pisses me off, especially people don't say it as much now, but they used to. Well, if we give them more time off, they're just going to work more. And I would say, well, you're making the assumption that they're going to take overtime in your department. Well, if you fill the spots because you're actually good at leading, I know it's a crazy concept, but there are people out there that actually know how to manage people.
I know.
Then all the spots in your department will be full. That means that overtime will be infrequent. And everyone once every few weeks might pick up a shift. So what does that do? The guy that that loves carpentry, or is a swimming instructor, or, whatever the thing is, they do that on the side. They do it during the day. They come home, they have dinner with their family, they go to bed. There's nothing detrimental about that at all.
Yeah.
Ideally, we pay them enough for a living wage. If they want over and above and they have a side hustle, fantastic. But 100%. If the side hustle is overtime because you're so short-staffed, that's on you. That's not on them. They shouldn't be working it. But if you pay them like shit and overtime is the only way they can make more money, then that's what they're going to do. If you pay them properly and you staff it properly, they will then go and do something and realize, I can make just the same money doing a 9 to 5, shaping surfboards. And that way, when I go back to the station, I'm fully rested and ready for my next shift.
100%, man. It's a ludicrous argument. I mean, I don't know how you know how you deal with it, but like I get furious when I see half thought out comments on posts that are just like, you have such little idea of what you're talking about that it's probably not even worth my time trying to convince you otherwise.
The worst one that I get a lot, and again, you got to remember that the dickheads of the world are the ones with the loudest voices. So
for sure,
they don't represent most people. But I'll be talking about the 2472, and someone will say the 4896 is the best. I'm like, well, that's just, and I don't even bother. I don't argue on social media. So you want to be, if you're not like nasty, if you're nasty, I'll block you and delete it. But if you're just being an idiot, then I'll just leave it, whatever, and then other people can eviscerate you. But what you're saying is a 56-hour work week is better than a 42-hour work week. Said no person ever, including your professional, sports performer. If you want to be the best firefighter, so it's just like, this is the thing is that, again, but I'll give the fire service some compassion. They are so burnt out and overworked that their ability to critically think is diminished. And therefore, that's where you get that kind of empty mentality and this pushback against people that are really trying to make the profession better, not complaining, bringing solutions to problems. But it is the firefighters themselves that are pushing back, the mutts as they call them, that are slowing down the progress. So if you want to be the best firefighter, be part of the solution. If you want to operate at the highest level, fight for the rest and recovery that will allow you to do that.
Rest and recovery, healthcare, physical fitness, proper mental health care. I posted a thing yesterday, and I truly believe it. It was taken out of a clip of a song, but the power of the people is so much stronger than the people in power. And we need to take that back now as firefighters, as supporters of the fire department. We need to realize that, like, we hold the power. We need to get together and show them that this is unacceptable.
100%.
But it's on us to do it. Like you said, it's on us to take that accountability and do it.
Yep. Yeah. And again, this is what fires me up. We have seen a lot of community, a lot of compassion, a lot of humanity the last few weeks through
Yeah.
football, soccer, and then through, the responses to the disaster in Venezuela. Like that's
Yeah.
who we are. And if that
Yep.
doesn't align with who we are nationally, who you are in your fire department, then it's time to kind of recalibrate what's most important.
Totally agree.
I want to go to cancer for a moment because
Yeah.
you quote in one of the slides something that I talked to Sarah Jenke about. And I think this is an important statistic because if you say a firefighter, well, the cancer is a risk and it shortens your lifespan, a lot of people are like, well, it is what it is. But when you tell them that there's a 27 times chance of your children having cancer, I think that then makes a lot of people go, wait a second, what did you say?
Yeah.
And it's not just that; it's infertility, it's Down syndrome, and so many other things that can affect our children.
Yeah.
That is proven, and whether it's the PFAS in our gear, the carcinogens in the fire, the sleep disruption from shift work itself. 27 times more likely for our children to have pediatric cancer. So let's expand on that for a moment, because I think that's really the cancer statistic that will, at least if you're a parent, will finally get you to actually pay attention about this.
For sure. And I mean, that was jarring for me to come across as well. And like, I understand why, right? Because I can see how it happens. But for me, it's one of the only jobs in the world that I think that like what happens to you can really hurt your family, right? Like, so you come home after a fire, and I remember my dad, he'd smell like fire for like a day and a half after the fire that he had, or like, even back then in the 90s, we didn't know this stuff, but like he'd keep his old gear in our coat closet with my coat. So it's like, all the stuff is off gassing in my living room next to my little kid jacket that I was wearing to grammar school. And like to the point where sometimes I'd be in school and people would be like, you smell like a fire. I'm like, oh yeah, well, my dad had a fire yesterday. And you kind of take that for granted. But there's a legitimate, proven, this is not mythological, this is not a thing, that the lack of cancer prevention that is going into the fire service and killing firefighters is killing the families of firefighters as well through, like you said, and it's not just cancer. How about PTSD? I slept terribly as a child, horrifically, to the point where I probably should have been in therapy because I was afraid. And my dad and my uncles all worked in the same group, so it was 2 nights a week. I couldn't sleep. I would try and go in and like lay in bed with my mom. I would be like, please, like somebody, I can't sleep. I'm so scared. And it was just like a normal thing. That's not normal for like a kid to be terrified of where his dad is all day and night. Like I always knew it was a real possibility. And I mean, those are real numbers. Those are jarring numbers. And that's happening right now. So the lack of prevention and screening for our firefighters is trickling into the families of our firefighters also.
I think this is where I've always focused, actually. I mean, to the point where I moved apartments because of my family. I even left my dream apartment, Anaheim, California, to move back because my son's mother wanted to be close to her family again. And it broke my heart, but, family first, and then right after that is the fire service. But it's the same with the work week. When you're fighting a better work week, you're saying, I don't want to be with my family as much. And when you put it in that terms, either A, you've got the wrong family, you need to leave, or B, maybe your mind is so tired that you're not even thinking properly.
Thinking straight.
But it's the same again, like you said, whether you're bringing carcinogens from a fire home, whether it's the shift work and some of the things that you've got from fires, PFAS, etc., that's affecting you reproductively, and then you pass that on to a child. I mean, there are so many elements, but again, these are things that we can address. We can address 100%. How clean and well built the station is. We can address the PFAS in our gear. We can address decon, with wipes and flame decon and some of these other great products that are out there. So we can pick it apart. Fitness standards, okay, you're less likely to have issues as well, sleep. So it's so important that we identify what is wrong. But when you put your family front and center instead of yourself, I think it's a very powerful perspective, because it's not about you. You've told yourself, well, I'll die for a stranger. I'll have a heroic death. Okay, you do you. But when you're talking about your little boy or your little girl, And if you just took some different proactive actions, you could lower the chance of them getting ill, whether they're already a child of yours or whether you're going to get pregnant one day. That hopefully will reframe your fight to create these conditions that minimize the illness and disease in our children.
100%. We had a moment that's adjacent to this during COVID. So my wife was an ICU nurse at UMass. And when COVID first hit, they turned her ICU into the COVID only ICU. So they were super understaffed. They had 100 times the patients and no more nurses very early on. And we had to have a conversation before we knew what it was, and when it was still this like mythological thing that people were just dying left and right from, where we were like, your job could kill our whole family. Like, you could come home unintentionally and give it to our 2-year-old daughter at the time. And we didn't know. And so like the decision was made that like we took these extreme decon protocols where like we would strip down immediately and throw everything in the washing machine. Then I would take my clothes off and throw it. And then we would shower, because like less than fear for ourselves, we feared for our little children at home. And I feel like if firefighters knew the same thing, they would be beating the drum. They would be kicking walls down to be like, because they're so, like you said, selfless and tough and like, well, it is what it is. It is what it is for you, maybe. It's not is what it is for your 2-year-old little daughter that didn't sign up to be a firefighter, that just wants to play with her friends and then develops pediatric cancer because you didn't decon properly or because you didn't fight to have separation of gear in living space. That's not what it is. That is not fair to the little girl or little boy or wife that didn't sign up to be a firefighter, that is now in danger because of you not being protected properly.
What have you seen, if you've done any diving at all, with cities or counties that have had similar conditions than the firehouses that you've highlighted, and someone has actually been able to force change, been able to storytell where they are now, building new stations, even though they fought it for so long?
100%. We have talked to these people, and we've looked into this because I wanted to talk to kind of everybody, and like, intentionally or not, whether I wanted to or not, I started getting stories from everybody around the world, right? But one thing that I saw that's funny is there's this sort of like weird backwards pride that a lot of the guys had to be in a crappy firehouse. Like, oh yeah, we picked, which I was wondering about like before I started, right? Was like, would some of these guys want to be at the shitty station as like a badge of honor? Like, well, yeah, I'm at because my dad was always like that. My dad, he got a job driving the chief for a little bit. And he said, I don't want to be a water boy. I'm going back to the rescue, when he was way too old to kind of do that because he wanted to be in the shit of it, right? And like, it's almost like being in war. It's like, well, no, I'm the front lines guy. I'm in the shit, So I wondered if there was going to be this. And there was that element to it where guys were like, yeah, I want to be down here in the front lines. I think Seamus Shanley, who's a Marine, also says that. I like being down where there's the clanging and banging of the train and the homeless people walking in and out of the station. So there's this like pride to it. But what I noticed is that when there's a brand new station that is properly set up, properly ventilated, nobody's not proud of being from there. And nobody is like, man, I really wish we went back to that shithole that we were in. There was not a single person that I've talked to that was like, oh, well, the downsides to a nice station are that we don't get sick. We don't wake up with the station 1 flu. The downside is I'm not mentally deranged from listening to 500 calls a day. They go like, I feel better. My life at home is better. My family life is better. I feel well rested. I feel safer. It's much more comfortable, even though this isn't about creature comforts. I'm not saying we should get big screen TVs for everybody and they should have lazy boys. No, but like, they're more comfortable. They're living there. You wouldn't live in a house that only had fucking stools to sit on, would you? But you expect that of the firefighter. You go, oh, well, they're sitting down on the job. It's like, okay, cool. Yeah, let's make them sit on a stool, because that'll prove a point. It's all this like sort of fake, not fake, backwards bravado, backwards pride that doesn't go away when you get a new thing, a nice thing. It's like anybody, man. Like when I was a little kid, I didn't have a ton of money. So like I was proud of my shitty baseball glove. But when I got a new glove, I don't remember where the old shitty one went. You know what I mean?
Well, when you're in a new station, still in the same area, you're still running the same calls, but you're
That's
getting a better
exactly it.
quality of rest and recovery, because those areas, which I saw out my whole career, they're the high volume, high tempo shifts, and you
Yeah.
run a lot of nasty shit. You run a lot of literally nasty shit.
Dude, yeah.
The homelessness and the gang killings and all the things. So
A lot
then
of
you
this
get
stuff.
to come back to your, clean station, and okay,
You
well, I'm not
decompress
dealing with,
for a minute.
backed up sewers now or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I can at least rest before I just get murdered again in another 27 minutes.
Yeah, and like one of the guys says it, I think it was Lieutenant Chase, that's like, I needed it, man. I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready for a lot of the stuff that I saw. And I knew firefighting, and I grew up with firefighting and hearing the stories. And you can hear a story about a car accident, and let me swear to God, to anyone that's not in this line of duty, you don't know what a car accident looks like until you see a car accident. You can't explain it. I heard thousands of stories of, oh, this happened and we guy lost an arm or whatever. And you're like, oh, wow, that's crazy. Until you see it, you go, that is fucking crazy. Sorry, that is crazy. Right. And he says something like, when I come back sometimes from a call, I need a place to like decompress. And I cut to him sitting at like a 35-year-old picnic table with his head down, because that's where he went to decompress, in the middle of the apparatus bay floor, sitting on a picnic table after going to a car accident. And I just caught it by chance, and I didn't know what he was going to say. We interviewed the guys after we shot, so I didn't know what he was going to say. And I was watching back the footage. And I go, oh my God, this is him decompressing after the call, because I knew timeline, we just went on a call, and he was sitting there on an old picnic bench and his head was hanging, and he didn't know we were filming. We were kind of banked around a truck filming him because I wanted to be as inconspicuous as possible. And I was like, that's what they do to decompress. They're like, right now, like he's trying to mentally process what just happened, and there's no safe place for him to do it. And Jason Burns in Fall River puts it great. We're expected as firefighters right now to go to a traumatic car accident where there may be kids or families involved and death. And then we're expected to just go back to the station and make ourselves a bologna sandwich and like go on with our day. Like, that's not normal. And I'm struggling. There were some times where like, I was like, shut the cameras off. Let's go back and sit on the truck. I don't want to, there's no need for us to be here for this. I don't want to be a part of this. I just couldn't do it. And so, doesn't matter how many stories you hear, doesn't matter how many movies you see, you don't know what that's like till you walk in the door and you see someone laying there that's overdosed on heroin, and there's a 2-year-old little boy going like, Dad, are you okay? I'm like, oh my God, get out of here. I don't want to be a part of this. And those guys have to be. That's their job, is to be a part of that. And then they go back to a decrepit station and eat a bologna sandwich with asbestos falling on their heads as they try and process what just happened. So you're still going to be going to those calls. But like you said, what's the harm of going to those calls and then coming back and decontaminating and having a safe place where you can sit down and go like, what did I just experience?
Yeah. 100%. I think someone made the comment like, look, we're not looking for gold-plated faucets.
Yeah,
and that's just it.
Yeah.
You just want a place that's clean, that's that's safe, like you said, especially in today's violent society. There's that kind of tongue-in-cheek comment about the red door. But I mean, some stations the door is important. But even when you contrast to other professions where they have biohazards, where they have hazmat in their whatever it is that they make, they're manufacturing, and you look at the PPE and you look at the separation and the documentation, and then you look at us where we walk through covered in carcinogens and sit down, and you're not asking for gold-plated taps. You're just simply saying, can we have an environment where when we go and do these things and we have these, biohazards on our uniform or our, the carcinogens on our gear, that we have these steps to mitigate between the working space and the living space. And to view that as a luxury is disgusting, because it's not a luxury.
James, you can look up the news story. It was on the news literally before I came into my office for this podcast, in Massachusetts, and I believe it's Quincy, if I'm correct. But a city in Massachusetts is the first city to have non-PFAS fire gear. It's a huge story that's in the news cycle right now. And there's news there and we're celebrating it. And we're like, this is amazing, non-PFAS gear. And my thought was like, shouldn't that be the standard? Shouldn't that be the normal? Like we should be shining a spotlight in shaming the areas that aren't that. It shouldn't be the celebration. That should be normal. That should be the standard. I'm very proud that they did do that. And I'm very happy that they're taking that first step. But like, how is that not the normal?
Well, what's interesting now is I'm not in the world of developing PFAS-free gear, but I'm hearing that the challenge is, PFAS was very good as far as what it was used for, the waterproofing, and that some of the different designs that they've got, they're not lasting as long, they're not as good in the heat, and I don't know, and I'm sure again, it's just a matter of time before we find the ones that do. What's interesting though with the PFAS, and I think I told with Diane too, this is one of the pieces, and I had my blood test done. I'm riddled with PFAS. I trained in my gear. I worked out in my gear. You used AFFF foam and a lot in Anaheim. It was pre-plumbed. So I'm dripping with the stuff. And, there's a company I'm working with that's coming out later this year, which is a probiotic that's going to pull PFAS from our body. Yeah. So very, very exciting. But yes, 100%. We need to figure out, who's making the right gear and then getting the PFAS away. But just going back to the work week, in the cancer conversation, and again, with the departments that you were talking about, they're already most of the way there, but these 56-hour plus work week, the federal firefighters, 72 hours, no one's talking about shift work. And shift work is a known carcinogen. So that has to be part of the conversation. The clean cab or a version of, the Plymouth vents getting the diesel exhaust. You can't just say, oh, it's all PFAS or it's all the carcinogens from the fire. Just like mental health, you got to pick every little piece out.
It's a stack. Exactly. And let me tell you, I have 2 points I want to make here because they're super important to what you just said. One, the venting on the trucks. I can't tell you how many videos and pictures I've gotten of firehouses where they have the vent and the vent's broken. And it's just still there. And everyone looks outside and they go, these guys have all they need. Why are they complaining? Hundreds of pictures sent to me of vents going to trucks, vents broken, and diesel fumes just pouring right out. So the vents maybe are like, they're definitely what you should be doing. They're definitely not all what people think they are. I can promise you that. I have the proof of it, right? Secondly, you touched on the non-PFAS gear maybe not holding up to the heat as well or lasting as long. And this is something, and my dad's old school, man, but like, and if you don't mind if I drop another F-bomb here, if you do, can I?
Please, I have.
Okay, so, when my dad started, they wore boots and coats. They didn't have turnout gear. They didn't have anything. They didn't wear hoods, right? They had a helmet and a mask. And I believe this. I'm not a firefighter, so I don't want to speak for firefighters, but why does it have to hold up to the heat as well as PFAS? Like, my dad had non-cancer causing gear, and you know what he said, right? He said, I preferred the boots and the pants because when it get too hot, I would know to get the fuck out. Like, he's like, we're not fucking supposed to be in the fire like that. Like, what is the advantage to having men inside of 1,000-degree heat? Why does the coat need to protect you from 1,000 degrees? Maybe if it's 1,000 degrees, you should back up a little bit and fight the fire from a little bit further away. He said the same about the hoods. He said, you know what? He was on the rescue for 25 years, and they implemented hoods at the very end of a fire. He said, you know what kept me alive a lot was crawling into a fully involved building. And when my ears started to burn, I got the fuck out of the room because I said, this is too hot for me. This is not a safe place for me to be. So maybe there's something to it. Maybe there isn't. But like, I don't know why you need gear that you can be broiled alive in. Maybe it's a good idea to have gear that when it gets too hot, you go, hey, this is too hot. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, there's two ways of looking at that. Firstly, if you find it untenable when you're already wearing gear, what are the chances of anyone being alive in that room?
That's what his point was. He's like, if I'm wearing this gear and I'm broiling and I'm on the rescue, am I really going to rescue someone in this room?
Exactly. And then the other one is in the wildland space. I had a smoke jumper, Jason Ramos. and he was talking about the shelters, and we just had 3
Yeah.
wildland firefighters killed by deploying
Yeah.
shelters, and they didn't
Yeah.
work. And his point was, it shouldn't be a shelter conversation. It should be we shouldn't have firefighters anywhere near there in the first place. And I agree with that 100%. There has to be responsibility for evacuation from the individual. There has to be responsibility on even, deciding where you can or can't build a house if you're talking about putting a lot of people in danger, or a place to go shelter in place where a community is on a big concrete slab, and, then they hunker down there. But to put firefighters in harm's way and then expect a little, sleeping bag to save them.
Go a little further. Yeah. And it maybe gives you a false sense of security too, right? Where you're like, hey, I can go a little bit further. I got this tent with me. It's like, man, I don't know. I talked to my father a lot about that, about football. We talked about earlier with the head trauma. I would be interested to see the level of CTE between football players compared to rugby players, right? Or Gaelic football players, because my theory is the more equipment we're giving, like I wouldn't have been hitting with my head if I didn't have a helmet on. I would go like, hey, I can't, that's going to hurt like hell. I'm going to try and tackle the guy another way. And I think a lot of these massive injuries we're seeing now, these like terrible concussions and these like blown out knees and stuff, are because of all the gear that the guys have. It's almost like if you want to make the sport safer, have them play in shorts and a t-shirt. I guarantee they're not going to be hitting the way they hit now. I promise you that.
100%. Yeah, because rugby, you're normally still running somewhat the same direction. You're not
That's
opposing,
what I mean. Yeah.
And even I've heard Joe Rogan say this many times, you get rid of the gloves in MMA, and we're seeing this now in that bare knuckle competition. Yeah. People look awful and they're getting bones broken and everything, but they're not getting hit, bad, 200, 300 times like a boxing match, or more than that in a boxing match.
I was just going to say a huge comparison that proves that is boxing versus MMA versus bare knuckle. Like, I'd rather get cut on the eye and knocked out when you're supposed to get knocked out from a punch than sustain 500 punches because the guy has a 12-ounce glove on, right? I'd rather get the cut and the fight end. Like MMA is the same way. MMA is far less dangerous in terms of head injury than boxing is, without any doubt, because of that exact reason.
Yeah, exactly. All right, well then let's go to the film. Where are you at as far as editing at this point? When and where is the premiere going to be? And then when can people find it, that aren't going to be physically at the premiere?
100%. So right now we have we were able to work with Sasha Shaban on the music for this movie. Sasha is, and what you heard is not the final music. So Sasha did a digital mix for this sort of like proof of concept that you saw. Sasha is the composer from the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, from Get Out. He's a legitimate, world-renowned composer. In the final cut of this film has a live 52-piece orchestra playing to the film. So they put the film up on a screen, a live 52-piece orchestra played to it, and we recorded that.
Wow.
So right now, due to the level of expertise that Sasha has, there's only a handful of people that can mix because it's 52 individual instruments with all the audio and voices that we recorded and sounds from the trucks. So right now the film is in Ireland, being mixed by a mixer over in Ireland, because he's one of the people that can do this. And we're doing it in a Dolby 5.2 mix. So it's going to be surround sound, an incredible film watching experience, right? So that's where the film is at right now in terms of where we're at with that. In the meantime, we're fixing the colorization. We're fixing some of the text stuff that you saw where like the names aren't all lined up. We're working on dialing in those sort of like cards that we have and placing those in the right areas, like you spoke about with the Fall River fire. But the premiere is August 6th, a Thursday night at the Hanover Theater, which is a giant, beautiful, historic theater in Worcester, Massachusetts. Half the proceeds go directly to the Last Call Foundation for the premiere and for the subsequent run. We're also partnering with Worcester Wears on a new clothing line that we hope becomes a universal slogan. This isn't movie-based. This isn't Worcester-based or Fall River-based. And the clothing line we're coming out with is support your local firefighter. Straightforward, promising message to support your local firefighter. Think of the people. Think of the firefighter that you know and support them. And that's going to go to Last Call Foundation as well. So August 6th at the Hanover Theater. Tickets are for sale at thehanovertheater.org. depending on how that sells, James, we have a tentative theatrical agreement with right now, I believe it's 14 theaters. It's always fluctuating throughout the New England area. They've seen the same cut you saw. They love the film, but the agreement hinges on how the premiere sells. So they want to see if there is an appetite for people to come see a documentary in a theater. I think you can attest to the fact that it's not shot like a documentary. It's shot much more like a narrative story. It's not a boring, slideshow that you're going to be seeing. This is a story. This is real. This is gritty. And I think it's interesting. So I hope that this sells well so that these theaters see that there is an appetite for people to come see this movie. And then from that, it's sort of a domino effect. From that, we can work it into streaming and maybe into some high-level film festivals as well.
Beautiful. Well, before I want to throw some closing questions at you before I let you go.
Yeah, for sure.
The first one I love to ask, is there a book or are there books that you love to recommend? It can be related to our conversation today or completely unrelated.
So, I mean, my two books are The Hero's Journey and Save the Cat. They're both film writing books that teach you how to create a narrative in a story, both from a character creating perspective, but also a structure that will help you make a screenplay, whether it's documentary or narrative feature, that will resonate with your audience. So like I used those in the construction of this film. I said, how can I take a documentary, apply the principles from these two movies, these heroes' journeys, and make it a narrative story so that it's not just a slideshow, right? So those right off the rip are like two books that changed my life as a filmmaker and as a writer. So yeah.
What about TV shows, films, or documentaries that you love?
I mean, the documentary that I think I mentioned that I pulled a lot of inspiration from for this was Restrepo. It's a documentary. Maybe I didn't mention it here, but Restrepo is a documentary where the filmmaker embeds with the United States Army in Afghanistan on this far outpost called Outpost Restrepo, named after a soldier that was killed there. And I wanted to capture that same emotion that I got when I watched that documentary. It was gripping, realistic, and gritty. And so that's what I tried to create when I made this film as well. So Restrepo is a documentary that if you haven't seen it, it really did like an emotional number on me, especially being related to like first responders and that sort of archetype of these like alpha males. And it shows you what war is really like. And it's not what you think it is. And I think that I hope this fire movie does the same. I hope you go like, I thought I knew the fire department. I guess I really didn't. Right. Film wise, a movie that I love is The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. I think that movie, the cinematography, the storytelling, the pacing, the acting is as close to perfection as you can get. That's a movie that's always lived with me ever since I saw it. And I try to replicate a lot of things from that film as well. And then what was the third part? It was films. What was the other one?
Film, documentary, or television?
Oh, television, TV. I'm not a huge TV watcher. So yeah, TV would be I like movies. I like documentaries. I'm usually like, if I'm not doing that, I'm into some kind of like true crime situation where I'm trying to figure out who murdered somebody.
You mentioned Restrepo. I had Sebastian Junger on. I think he's been on 4 or 5 times. I forget which. But yeah, cool. I mean, a phenomenal writer, phenomenal filmmaker. I mean, just an incredible
truly,
man.
Like, yeah, maybe let's get on a dual episode. I can fan out.
There we go. All right. Well, then the next question is there, speaking of, of good people, is there a person you'd recommend to come on this podcast as a guest to speak to the first responders, military, and associated professions of the world?
Wow. I mean, one guy that comes to bat right away is Jason Burns, who's the executive director of Last Call Foundation. He's another Diane Cotter friend as well. But I mean, he just exemplifies that. He's an outspoken proponent for firefighter safety and wellness. And he's willing to kind of step where people don't usually step. Another guy is, in terms of the mental health and military, if he'd be willing to do it, would be Seamus Shanley, who's a Worcester guy that he grew up in the same street as me, a gritty sort of Irish-American middle-class neighborhood. We grew up on the same street. I've known him his whole life, but he's a Marine, firefighter, and just is what he says he is. He's the real deal guy. I don't know if he'd be willing to do it, but if he is, you guys would have a phenomenal conversation.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd love to get either of those on. So, the door is
I'll
open.
talk to them both.
Thank you.
We'll figure it out. Yeah. Jason was texting me while I was on, so I'll hit him back like, hey, I got a gig for you too.
There we go. All right. Well, the last question before we reiterate where people can find you in the film. What do you do to decompress?
I mean, dude, I'm a big believer in mental health. So, it's the summertime. First of all, I was talking about it today. I sit outside for like 30 minutes and just like close my eyes and meditate and recharge. I do sleep hypnosis at night. I listen to sleep hypnosis podcast that you can get just right on Apple Podcasts. Sleep Magic is one of my favorite ones that helps me kind of clear my mind and get ready for the day. I read the Daily Stoic every day, which is meditations on stoicism and how to persevere and kind of live life in a way that is worth living. So those are three big things. And then I spend time with my family. I love hanging out with my wife and kids and being an example for them to live outside the box of that, like 9 to 5, you have to work for a corporation or you're not really working type thing. So being about it, bro, doing it and being about what I say I'm about.
Love it. All right. Well, let's just reiterate where people can find the tickets for the premiere, and then where else online can they either follow you or learn more about you?
Yeah. So at thehanovertheater.org is where the tickets are for sale, or you can go over to my Instagram page, which is at Tommy Jay, Jay, Dwyer, Dwyer. And I have everything on there, all the trailers, all the stuff. And then for the documentary, it's at Burnin Down Doc. But I have a bigger following on mine where I think it's a bigger platform right now. So please follow me at Tommy Jay Dwyer, and you'll see all the stuff that we're working on.
Brilliant. Well, Tommy, I want to thank you so much. It's been such an amazing conversation. I can put my hand on my heart and say that even the version of the film that I watched was phenomenal. So I'm really excited to see, the final cut. And for everyone out there, if you're local, make sure you attend that premiere. And if you're not, make sure you're part of the push to get it brought to an area near you, whether it's a streaming service or a theater. So I want to thank you so much for being so generous with your time and coming on the Behind the Shield podcast today.
Thanks for having me, man. What a great conversation. And I hope I come back again and can report back that there's massive change happening in the fire service.